everyone. Hope you have a good coffee break and you have the energy to continue with us today. Let me first introduce you to our panel today. So I will be your moderator in this panel. So I'm Noemie from Incofin, but purpose not to talk about Incofin. We'd like first to talk about our esteemed panelists today. We have the pleasure to have with us first Professor Dr. Frank Bliss, which is professor at University of Hamburg, representing today the Cambodian project on microfinance from the Institute for Development in Peace. Professor Bliss has more than 40 years expertise in assessing poverty in Cambodia and worldwide, a consultant also in other matters such as access to water. We also have the pleasure to have Mr. Phal with us, which is Secretary General of the CMA, but also comes with 2 decades of experience in development finance. Together with us also Nitin Madan, which is Regional Director at the SPTF, responsible amongst others, and sorry if I missed some, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Indonesia, Myanmar,
Philippines.
And Philippines. But also has more than 10 years, 15 years of experience in customer protection in Cambodia and also based in Cambodia. Last not least, we have also Daniel Rozas, which is a member of the European Microfinance platform, but also a founder of Mimosa, and also brings to the table today more than a decade of experience in implementing lending guidelines, also customer protection in Cambodia. That's our panel today of experts to discuss a topic that is very important to all of us. It's how can we ensure more responsible financial inclusion in Cambodia? We have heard, we have read over the last 1, 2 years, 3 years, more and more stories, research pointing at increasing over-indebtedness, risky refinancing, potential aggressive collection or origination practice. And this has raised questions from civil society, rightfully, journalists, but also the investor community, public authorities. And today, with our panel, we'll try to address some of these questions. The question that we'll try to address is first trying to unpack the complexity and the magnitude of over-indebtedness in Cambodia, but also recognizing what the sector has implemented over the last 10, 15 years that we have been active and following up on Cambodia. All these initiatives that have been implemented, self-imposed by the sector, self-regulation, and trying to understand how they have helped to protect clients in Cambodia. And then, are these response enough? And together with our panel, trying to assess also what could we do more to protect clients in Cambodia. So I have set the stage. Now I'd like to leave the floor to our panelists. First, Dr. Bliss, Frank, can you elaborate how widespread and detrimental are these irresponsible lending practices in Cambodia? I think you're also the author, I forgot to mention, of the very famous recent publication on microfinance in Cambodia from the Center for Development and Peace on Cambodia that was released last year and also commissioned by the German government. That brings a lot of perspective, so maybe it would be very insightful to hear from you.
Okay, thank you so much. It was a survey from February, March of last year. And it was the first, let's say, open, scientific, and anonymously carried out survey about 1,388 households with loans and without loans. So it was the first survey in Cambodia to cover, let's say, the population, the rural population, and to look why someone had got a credit, why not, and what they did with a loan and what was a problem with a loan. So it was not only the problem, we also asked the usages, and to start with a positive message, about 80% of the people were very happy with the loan. And coming to the bad message, 50% of the people had problems to repay the loan and different problems. And Just to inform you, we have more or less a representative survey. We did not choose the people from the banks list, but really accidentally, 24 villages, 6 provinces, 12 communes. So no information before. It was only the commune leader to be informed. He did not know which village we would choose. So it was no preparation possible at all. And within our sample, about 50% of the people had problems to repay the loan. They were unhappy with the repayment, but 80% were happy with the impact of the loan. I think this is interesting. Now we are here, I think, due to the fact that NGOs in Cambodia and also in Germany, and I think also worldwide, took up the case of Cambodia and saying there was violation of human rights. They said child labor, forced migration for work, and less food, less quality food, and especially loss of land due to the non-repayment or non-capability of repayment of loans. So what human rights violation is, we can discuss. From our survey, we could say, yes, it is possible that human rights are violated, but not everybody who was not able to repay and had to sell the land was, let's say, impacted by loss of human rights or the violation of human rights. What is a clear fact? There is a very aggressive loan acquisition system in Cambodia, or at least it was until last year. And I give you a good example. We were refused by 3 village chiefs to carry out this survey in Cambodia out of 24 villages. They were expecting us to coming from the MFI sector. They said, no, we do not want any more these people going from house to house. And so please go out of our village. We don't want to see you here. Then we told them, no, we are not coming from, we're coming from Germany. We want to learn about the problems of the sector. And then they say, oh, okay, so please do the survey. So this is already the size. And during our visits, I made about half of these myself. I always met some loan officers in the villages and going from house to house and doing loan acquisition, but also to, let's say, to try to get the money from the people back. From the survey, we also know that the regulations in Cambodia have improved during the last 6 or 7 years, but there is a lot of still black sheep in, I would say, the MFI sector, in the formal sector. I'm not speaking about the informal sector. Informal loan habits are terrible, up to 1% per day. So this is not our problem, and we have a very small, I would say, percentage in our sample. We have less than 10% of the people who were speaking about informal loans, and the size of these informal loans was more or less irrelevant. But our average size of loan was, I think, 4,000 and some dollars, so that the formal sector, I would say, is more covering than 90% of the full loan volume in our sample. The black sheep, we call it black sheep. I introduced this word. They were not assessing the repayment possibilities. They did not make the assessment of the cash flow, but they were very often taking providing the loan, and this includes also the managers in the MFI. It's not only the small agents based on collaterals and land. So we found 111, I think, ID poor people. These are extremely poor people, identified as extremely poor, who could not pay their living, their daily living. They got a loan. And it was not an economic investment loan. It was a personal loan for covering the daily expenses. And this is not possible. You cannot give someone who has an ID poor card, being extremely poor, a loan with an average of $2,000 and more dollars. So why they got these loans? They got the loans due to the fact that they had land. And many of these people in our sample, it was shocking for our colleagues from KfW when I said 1.2% of these people which had a loan lost the land due to not to be able to repay the loan. 1.2%. we covered 5 years. So in total, it was about 6.2 or 6.3% of people who had to sell land. And not only ID poor people, a lot of other people got loans without a really strict cash flow analysis. They got it due to the fact that they had the land titles. So back to the roots of the problems. In every village in Cambodia, you'll find small papers on the tree. Every entrance of a big town is architecturally, I would say, dominated by MFI buildings. We have up to, I think, 40 in one provincial capital. And I found one poster, take easy money. So I think this is one problem. Money in Cambodia, loan in Cambodia, to get it's too easy. Only you need it, you want it, you get it if you have the collaterals. Now, I'm not talking about the reforms. I think we will get this information later, but up to the study last year, it was absolutely dominated by the MFI sector up to the last village. Another point which is a bit shocking for me, or was shocking, when I know in Germany, a loan, I'm over indebted and I have to restructure a loan. What happens? I have to negotiate with my bank. They want to get the money back, and I want to get rid of the loan and of the legal aspects which will follow. So we will compromise. If I'm an entrepreneur in Germany, I cannot pay back. I pay back what I can, and the bank will cancel the rest. But in Cambodia, loan restructuring means take a higher loan. So someone who was not able to repay a loan, a small loan, got a higher loan, how he can or she can repay this higher loan back if she is not able to pay the smaller loan back, and losing the land. Concluding, it is a dimension, I think, which is a critical discussion with the NGO sector, with the National Bank, with the Cambodian Microfinance Association. And I'm also not agreeing with the NGOs to say that everybody who lost land or who had a family member to work abroad in Thailand is affected by a human rights violation. There are some cases. A lot of people in Cambodia also are specialists in getting a loan, knowing they cannot pay the loan back, and the next day they are no longer in the village. So this is also the case. So not everybody really is affected by human rights violation. But the problem in the last year was, I would say, shocking for our KfW partners. They said every case where someone lost his land due to over indebtedness is too much. This was a little bit our findings.
Very interesting to hear from your experience, also being on the field and talking to microfinance client directly. Maybe Daniel, also you can bring your perspective, also having research more at the systemic level. How do you assess the complexity of the over-indebtedness issue in Cambodia?
Sure, absolutely. And really, it parallels very much the experience that you had, Frank. And what I really want to talk about is, very briefly, I want to talk about 3 problems to kind of highlight. And the first is really that Cambodia is an outlier. It really stands out in terms of what you were talking about, Frank. Loans are very easy to get. How does it show up in the data? Well, it has the largest number of borrowers per capita, and it also has the largest loan sizes for microfinance. So it really stands out. So just to give you a visual, this is the type of work we do in Mimosa. I'm not going to go explain what this chart means. It doesn't matter. I just want you to look at the visual and just see how far outside of the regular norm of the pattern Cambodia is on that chart. It really is an outlier. And this measures only the penetration rate. So basically borrowers per capita. The second chart is loan sizes. This data is already a few years old. If anything, the gap between Cambodia, which is on the far, which is the red color on the far right, that gap is probably even widened because loan sizes have been growing. So you had, and by now the average loan size I think is well over $5,000. It's not even. It was when you were doing the survey, it was over 4,000. But These things have been growing very fast. You have the combination of both. So the most number of borrowers, and those borrowers have the largest loans of any market. And I think you would struggle to find a market where the average microfinance loan is over $5,000. That's really unusual. And maybe it's worth to look at how that has happened. One of the key trends that shaped this is a decline in loan repayments, which generally speaking would be a good thing, right? But it matters how it's happened. So this data is again from a few years ago, but it's illustrative. So you have loans at different sizes, at different amounts. And I'll give you an example. Let's say a loan of $3,000 might have had a monthly repayment of about $200 a month. And 3 years later, that same $3,000 loan is going to have a monthly repayment of $100 or even less. So it's just this, and it's like magic. It's great. But the thing is, it hasn't been driven by interest rate declines. A little bit, yes, but not primarily. The key driver has really been increasing loan terms. So you amortize that $3,000 over an additional 2 or 3 years, and voila, you have a low repayment. It's the kind of pattern we've seen in many countries that have gone through the cycle of increasing debt growth. And that really brings to mind the second issue. I actually think that over-indebtedness has a problem, and this is kind of consistent with the data that you've seen, and also other surveys like the 60 decibels, where you see that a large majority of clients, I don't mean 50, 55%, this is a large majority of clients are actually doing fine. Like they are happy, they think the loans are worthwhile. Some of them might have some challenges making repayments, but actually that's true for everybody. I mean, if you're making a mortgage payment for your house, sometimes it's hard. So it's not necessarily a testament to that person as being over-indebted. There is a minority, not a tiny minority, maybe 10, maybe 15%. It depends how you define it, that are struggling. Among those, there are some that are really severely struggling and actually wind up either selling land or doing other things like taking a child out of school so that they can work. Those things are happening. They're real problems. But I think a much bigger problem is not those borrowers, but the borrowers who actually are doing fine, but they're over-leveraged. So the amount of debt they have is so high that were anything to happen in their family, be it some extended illness or being some business failure, all of a sudden they have no fallback. When the loan is small, you can find ways. But when the loan is so large, there's really no alternative. It's hard for a family whose loan is maybe equivalent to 2 or 3 times their annual income, which is not so unusual. And now all of a sudden that annual income is you miss 3 months of work or whatever. It's very, very hard to get back. And I think that's a much more difficult problem. It's sort of the risk that's hidden, right? And it only shows up later as an actual over-indebted client. So that's the second issue. And that actually reminds me a little bit to give you one thing from sort of my past life. I used to work in the mortgage sector in the US until 2008. Now, those of you who are old enough might remember something's happened in 2008 that had to do with mortgage finance in the United States. I personally maybe not responsible, but that's another matter. The thing is, if you were to go back and done a survey like Dr. Bliss did in the US and talk to, let's say, subprime borrowers in 2005, you would have found that most of them were doing just fine. They're perfectly comfortable making the payments, very much the way many Cambodian clients are. And then all of a sudden, by the time you go to 2007, you have a complete collapse, right? Because you have an economic crisis. These people are over-leveraged. They do not have the income to cover loans were something to happen. There are other structural things that have to do with those loans that we can talk about another time. And so that kind of brings to mind the third point. And I think this is another one that's really important. We talk a lot about the black sheep, as you talked about, Frank, about organizations doing something wrong, being aggressive in lending, aggressive in collections. And that does happen. These are real problems. But I think a much bigger problem is the ones that are doing everything right. And my personal opinion is, even if you had every MFI, the smallest institution in Cambodia adopt the best practices in client protection today, you would still have a problem. And the problem isn't that they're doing something wrong. The problem is there's so much debt that the presence of that debt creates a very unstable system. And there is no fallback position when something goes wrong. And I think that's actually at the core of the problem. And so what we're seeing is, we're seeing kind of that tip of the iceberg, the one that actually comes up above the water. those are the problems, but below the water is this much deeper problem that takes quite a lot to address, and it's not going to be easy. That's my hopefully 5 minutes.
Hopeful, I'm not sure. We'll try to see how we can address that pessimism and see some lights together with our panel. But I think it's quite interesting. Both of you refer to the black sheep. Maybe it's a question for you, Wendy. Are all players playing the same rules in the market? So maybe I'm looking also a guardian of the time in 2 minutes. According to you, are all the players playing the same rules? Are they bad sheep?
I think the sector in Cambodia, we have the formal sector that governed by the central bank that very regulates and very responsible. There are also informal sector that also now is in the regulated by the non-bank authority, and some are still need to make a clearer example, like the informal money lender, loan shark. Those are the key challenge for the formal sector. So I think this is the area that we have been working so hard with the government authority through the central bank and the non-bank authority, relevant government ministry, including local authority. So I think this is the area, a part of the priority that we are working to address. And I think we have been so grateful with a colleague and friend who care and love Cambodia. And the research I found is it's a good information. It really helps us because it's normal. We usually go to health check to find what are the problem. And we also found that the information are valuable for us to look to whether it's true or not, but it's a blessing to have more information and allow us to reflect, and this is a part of life. When you have problems, you make improvement. It's normal. It's how life go, and we have to acknowledge during the past 3 year, 5 year, life is hard for everyone, not just in Cambodia, across the world. It affected by COVID. From the early 20, we thought COVID will get better than the war, the other political issue, and it escalates from the Europe to Middle East, and also in Asia we also face number of things, and see the high costs for the high interest cost that from the US, from the Europe, then it affects the financial sector in Asia, so it put more cost for client. But for us, we fight hard for affordable lending for our people, because microfinance in Cambodia is not just a normal microfinance. It share a strategic partnership to the development of Cambodia, a big part to the whole government strategy to. It's like the blood, the heart that pump the blood to the body to make sure that economy becomes stronger. So in the country, we have a Ministry of Economy and Finance, the strategy to develop economy that want to have more money in the market to have economy function. But we also have a central bank that very conservative, very prudent approach, look to the risk-based perspective, that so we are in between to balance. But for professional association, protecting client is the heart of what we do. The country have do a lot from the smart campaign, from now consumer protection pathway. So all those journey to protect client, because we only believe protecting client is the only resilient and sustainable of the microfinance sector.
So it's important to understand also the economic context and not to put all the issue linked to specific market related, but also the economic context is also driving potentially some distress for the Cambodian clients as well. Nitin, if I can ask you, also, well, we hear it's very easy to get a microloan, and we know that some clients, as you say, may not always be good willing in repaying, so they have bad repayment behavior as well. So maybe question would be, are the consumer not sufficiently equipped to take the loan, or the product not properly adapted to them?
It's both,
Mhm.
right? It's never one issue. It's effectively both, right? I mean, there are countless examples now of organizations. It's basically cut, copy, paste job that's happening on product development, right? I mean, there are some organizations that have not done client satisfaction surveys for 4 years, right? There is, I asked, for example, in an assessment, you know, how do you do product development? Basically, it's competitor data. There's no client voice on the table, right? And these are organizations that, by the way, have failed their certification, right? But, and not just recently, they failed their certification, let's say in 2017, but money continues to flow into them, right? Money from people in this hall, right? On the client side, yes, there is a need to better equip clients, not just with financial literacy, but also on issues around empowerment, because we are learning that clients are not always comfortable in raising their voices, right? And they're very clear that, yes, I know the hotline number, I don't want to use it, right? I want to speak to somebody, right? So
we are coming back to not play all the players playing by the same rule.
well, yes.
But it's not part of our track, sorry, but I'm tempted to ask you this question. Are these certification reliable as well, sufficient for investor to because you point at the fact that these institutions continue to fuel a lot of funding into microfinance sector and for investors as well. So are these certification a good?
So firstly, I think I just want to correct. I think certifications have been oversold. Certifications will tell you of the status at a certain point of time, right? Things can change tomorrow, right? Investors can change, you know, the situation can change tomorrow, right? It doesn't absolve anybody from conducting their own proper due diligences, right? So it's so please don't see certification as a proxy for, you know, everything is perfectly normal and it will stay that way. Right? We have to be very careful about that. From our perspective, we have never said that certifications are compulsory. From our perspective, an assessment is more important than a certification.
So these certifications are not waterproof, let's say. They require monitoring. It's an important sign eventually also to identify the players that are willing to play the rules already.
Yeah.
But then maybe I think we talk a lot about the problem, but there have been many initiatives self-imposed by the sector. I think Cambodia is often pointed as one of the best example also in terms of developing self-regulation for already 10 years to address client protection. And indeed, as you mentioned, rigorous research that has been conducted and also 60 decibel report, they show that the majority of the clients are happy. They see a positive impact of their microloan. There's still 50% that are experiencing difficulties, and that's the side of the iceberg that we see. How what have been the initiative that the sector has been taking to protect the client, the one that are under the iceberg that we don't see, that may become over leverage, and also to make sure that these 1% of cases where there may be aggressive collection practice, they go back to 0%. What have been done over the last decade, Wendy?
Okay. So before I go to that initiative, I just want to take very quick to share some perspective from the sector. This is again not a debate to any funding, but really to explain what is about the sector. So Cambodian is unique because the lending is lent based on household. So the size that you mentioned about 4,500 is a household per household. If you divide by 4.6, you will see the number. And then for the microloans, around 62%. I mean, many clients take microloan, and only small proportion of money. So we divide the loan tier. This is the professional data from Credit Bureau. Okay. And so it doesn't mean we are saturated or over. So we're happy to explain more, but I don't want to take more time. And the other perspective is Cambodia is the micro enterprise country. Through the data of IFC, over 50,000 establishment of micro enterprise that absorb to that lending. You see the green line is that the loan go to micro enterprise that is the engine of the local economy. Cambodian cannot develop that much without microfinance. I think Professor Bliss have highlighted the positive contribution and also the impact study of microfinance that we conduct by clear in 2023 also confirmed very similar to Dr. Bliss. So, like I said, life is hard. We all face the same issue. Although I am work for financial sector, I also have my own problem. So that life, but we don't ignore the challenge of client. We take client to our heart because they are our people and they are our country and our people is our home. So when we have challenge, we take effort to resolve it. We don't keep it. We don't ignore it. So across those challenges, like what I said, the growth in the past year have provided great opportunity. It means client can have more option. The cost of lending have go down, so from advantage. However, there are challenges that we also have been working so hard to address over the past year. I think over the last 5 years, the association. When I say association, we are part of the ecosystem of the financial sector. So we work closely with central bank and association of bank and also the relevant line ministry. So I think we have paid a lot of effort and though effort, we took the right-based approach. So we look to demand side and supply side. So from the supply side, we have done a lot from the regulation that and also advocate the central bank to regulate more to strengthen the gap. And also we also do a lot of capacity building. And you might heard a lot about the code of conduct, the lending guideline, and the consumer protection initiative. But capacity building have done to the front line. I think the finding, the feedback from Dr. Bliss have been helpful to us to input into the initiative that we take over the last year. And then we discussed this a lot also during last year, early this year meeting, in Cambodia. So we do the table, what Dr. Bliss recommend, what have been the ongoing effort, and what we need to do more. So it is a positive development. The whole sector led by central bank and professional association is decisive to strengthening the inclusive finance in Cambodia. We all share the same vision of you concern that the only achievement to the resilient and sustainable sector of microfinance is to protect client, because client is a big part of the sector. It's like a boat and the water. We need each other. The water can make the boat stand strong, but also the water can make the boat collapse. So we understand clearly, and I think the information we have from whether from Dr. Bliss, from Mimosa, it's a good compliment. It is a good information for us. But I also want to assure you that as a sector, we are confident in what we drive our sector forward, because we have the insight of the country. We born in the country, we develop that sector, that sector developed by the Cambodian and with support from all the partners. And we share a big gratitude to your support, to your concern, and it also a part of the strategy to strengthen the market system approach. That's what we have been working closely with SPTS. We know that the lesson learned from Smart Campaign is very valuable, and it also helps us to align with the consumer protection pathway. And so from both demand side, supply side. So for demand side, for the client part, we share the need to do more for client, especially on financial literacy, consumer empowerment, and protection. And we want to make it more strategic, because we only believe that whatever homegrown within the structure of the market system that drive by our own sale is sustained. And we empower the local people through the initiative of self-finance. Self-finance is not just a simple financial literacy project. It's about consumer protection. We benchmark a lot of best practice from Philippines. We thank SPTF and AFD that support us, this consumer empowerment project that we learn, and also the TA from SPTF have helped us. And we also engage with UNCDF around this kind of consumer empowerment as well. And we work also with JICA, the Japanese Development Agency, that also the TA to Central Bank. So and also this is the commitment forward is Consumer Protection Center, helping the market and the key actor to embed this culture is necessary. We don't talk about the quick fix. We talk about something that homegrown and stay sustained in the market. That people put the heart to this commitment.
And I hear I hear two things that are quite marking to me. First is, well, you have been working on putting the right safeguard and hearing from not contesting all these research that you have receiving, but I think it's really seems to be driving your willingness to do more to protect the Cambodian. But I also hear a call for further partnership. You talk about UNCDF, you talk about researcher, Professor Bliss. We have incorporating with Daniel, SPTF, Cerise. So I hear really a call for partnership and really willingness to do more. And maybe it's an opportunity to bring you, to ask you, Nitin, your perspective as well, about additional initiative that you have been taking with SPTF Cerise in order to ensure further safeguard for clients.
Sure. So I think, so I want to discuss about some very specific initiatives that we've launched, right, along with the National Bank of Cambodia and the two associations. So I'm hoping that this, you were talking about the 80%, the iceberg that's under the water. So, you know, perhaps this is that 80% that we need to address, right? Because it's much deeper. You know, the National Bank said that they were concerned about the fact that levels of profitability of some of the banks and incentives of the CEOs were unacceptably high, particularly during COVID and what was going on. So they were very uncomfortable with that. So we sat down and we said, okay, I want to sort of deep dive into the context also. It's important that people understand this, where all of these initiatives are coming from also. Yeah. So we sat down together and we said, okay, what can we do? And we said, let's get all the CEOs, but not just the CEOs, the shareholders also, into a room, and let's workshop with them the problems that currently the country is facing and the sector is facing, right? And it's very interesting because one of the slides, we started off with a debate, right? We covered 316 CEOs and shareholders across 8 different workshops under the aegis of the National Bank, right? In their training center, organized by the two associations, right? And we led the design and development and the delivery of the content, right? And we had a debate, aggressive sales and collections, real estate issues that are there in the market currently, and the Ratnakiri incidents. These are reflective of systemic failures, especially at a level of governance, right? And that governance is ineffective in terms, corporate governance is ineffective in terms of client protection. Do you agree? Yes, no, or are these isolated incidences? 90% of the CEOs and shareholders are saying it is a corporate governance issue. We are ineffective in all of this. So for us, whatever the data says, it's pretty much settled. There is no debate anymore of, there is a problem, there isn't a problem, and so on, right? So the next step is, what do we need to do? Why is it that despite CEOs saying that we understand this and at our levels, we are not doing okay? It's a function of capability. It's not a function of intent. It's a function of capability, with many of the CEOs and shareholders saying, I can connect the financial data. I know, I'm measuring the financial data well, I can connect it. But they're not connecting that same data to client protection issues, right? It's mostly around ESG. Yeah, everybody's doing a client satisfaction survey, apart from a few that I mentioned earlier, but virtually everybody is doing it. But the deep dive into that data, it's like a tick box. The deep dive into the data in terms of what does it mean for my product design, my processes, that client voice, right? Rigorous client voice piece is really missing from these discussions, right? So these workshops have hopefully really opened up, these discussions now, and we'll see the impact in the next couple of months, because we just finished the last one now.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they designed the code of conduct, right, the sector code of conduct, the National Bank was very clear, publicly said that 70%, 30% is you guys signing the code of conduct. 70% is the implementation, and we want to see implementation.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a discussion, and I asked Vandy, how will you show implementation? Right? Because the code of conduct is good, but it still has a number of broad standards. How will you measure it? Right? Because if you can measure it, you can monitor it. So then that's how the harmonization project came about, where we harmonize the code of conduct with the CP standards that we have. So now it's aligned. It's aligned to a point where if an organization is compliant on the code of conduct, it's equal to a bronze certification level. They would still need to undergo the whole process. The tool for measurement has been designed. Associations have seen it, the NBC has seen it. Our push on this is that it must be now, maybe not regulated, but the NBC needs to make very clear that this tool, everybody needs to apply, and not through self-regulation. The certifying bodies need to come in, do the assessments of at least the top 25 or 30 system critical banks, MDIs, MFIs. Remember, it's not only MFIs, it's the banks also. Right? The banks, MDIs, MFIs, leasing companies, and the rural credit operators. We get the data, analyze it, have a state of sector report. This is evidence for the National Bank then to go ahead and actually start to regulate the sector. Because there is an understanding and acceptance of the fact that, yes, regulation is not as strong as it should be, right? But nobody's really discussing in concrete terms what should be in that regulation, right? Maybe not nobody. There are some initiatives that are happening, but they seem to be all talking about a complaint handling center, right? And it's being designed not with client voices, because our experience of the field, clients are saying, I know the hotline number, right? But I don't want to use it. I want a face-to-face interaction, right? But all I'm hearing from everybody is, let's have a new complaint handling center. Let's add the word independent in front of it, and then that ticks many of the boxes.
True.
Right? These are not client voices on the table, right? This is what we need to show to everybody else, that, yeah, we're doing something about it, right? So we'll miss the bus again on all of this, right? So there's the workshops that we've done, there's the harmonization tool that we've done, and then the Safe Finance initiative, which Vandy's already spoken about. The consumer empowerment element is very critical in that. Our Philippines project is showing some very positive results in terms of clients actually paring down their requests or actually refusing multiple loans now. Let's see what happens, in Cambodia. It's just recently been launched. I mean, there are 10 other initiatives that I can talk about, right? That are currently being worked on. I don't know if you have the time, but
I think we'd like to also hear a different perspective.
Sure.
Could be interesting also to share afterwards where people could find about all these initiatives.
Yeah.
I think what's very interesting is it's not enough to have these standards, and the sector has been working around all these standards, harmonizing them, but it's also enforcing them.
Yes.
To train. But what you're doing now is really to try to enforce them at all levels.
Yes.
To address the governance level, the different stakeholders, but
Yes.
also at the client. So to make sure that the clients are better equipped
Yes.
to understand how they subscribe to microloans, but at the same time that the loan officer are better equipped not to oversell.
Well, the CEOs and shareholders
And the
are better
CEOs
equipped not
make
to
sure they
oversell.
don't push.
The loan
Yeah.
officers know it. The loan
Yes.
officers will only do what's
Exactly.
coming from the top. So
Yes, exactly. At all level of the organization,
Yes,
because it
yeah.
needs to be reflected in the right incentive as well in the
Yes.
branch. But then there are limits in the self-regulation. I think it's SPTF that also I mentioned in recent publications that law can also change a culture, and that's important
Yes.
as well. And maybe I can turn back to you, Professor Bliss. Do you have any additional practical recommendation from your research, maybe to the NBC that will not join us today, but if there will be enforcement of new regulation, what will be this concrete recommendation in 2 minutes?
I think regulation is not the problem.
Mhm.
Problem is, again, as we already heard, is a practice. And there, starting with the good, there is a very good introduction into finance paper with pictures from one of your MFIs. I have seen it. It is excellent. It is a 10-minute training course, and it's starting with the keyword saving. Save money and then apply for a loan.
Mhm.
The bad thing is I haven't seen this paper in the offices of the MFI, and I haven't seen it nowhere in the household.
Okay.
So the point is bring the existing training papers,
Yeah.
educative papers to the people, but not only the paper, but also the message
Mhm.
by a person who is qualified to explain what are the benefits of a loan, but also what are the risks of a loan.
So you need to invest in financial literacy and continuously. It's never
Yes.
enough to have one
Yes,
program. You need
yes.
to strengthen.
Yeah, but especially if you have a loan applicant, then please use these educational material, show him or her
Yeah.
the pictures and start with the saving.
Interesting.
This is
Right.
one point. The second one we had already last year in May, this point, the communication, a telephone number is nothing, as you said. Huh? A telephone number is nothing. It is already good if a person is behind the phone number. This is already the first step. So many people told me, yeah, we have this compliance information, but nobody is responding. Then another step, responding doesn't mean that we need a telephone operator. We need a person who knows the lending history of this person, who knows the problems, not in an abstract way, but in the practical way, and can talk now with this poor woman or this poor man, what his problem is and how this problem can be solved.
Yeah. And I think that's something, Daniel, that you have also shared in quite a few of your publications as well, is having some independent mechanism for complaint handling. Can you elaborate further on how would you recommend, again, the NBC or the CMA to implement such?
Absolutely. So I think it really goes much further than handling complaints, because complaint presumes that somebody did something wrong and you can complain about it. It's very hard to complain and say, hey, I can't make my payment. That's not a complaint. That's a situation. And it is one thing to go to, so for one thing, this is not a kind of thing, a situation that a person is going to talk on the phone with anybody. You can't get into the details of your cash flow, of your loans. So absolutely, this needs to be some mechanism that enables people who are trusted and independent and knowledgeable and have access to credit history. So there's a whole set of layers that have to be in place. So yeah, these are people can check the credit report for this person. And then they have to be accessible. So that means you're talking about probably several hundred or well over 100 branches across the country. If you scale it up and think about, okay, let's say that 0.5% of Cambodian borrowers will really be struggling and distressed to need genuine counseling. You're talking about 0.5% would be about 30,000, no, about 15,000 people per year.
Yeah.
Right? That's a lot of people. So what kind of system are you going to build that can handle? And these are in-depth discussions. These are not things that I can deal with within an hour. It means coming back next week. It means now I have to go talk to the lenders. Now I have to go back talk to the borrower again. This is a process. So this person would be able to handle a certain number of cases at a time, and it's not that many. So thinking about what kind of system can create that. And the third part I think this system has to have is these persons need to be empowered to actually make decisions. Maybe those decisions can be appealed and there's a process for that, but they have to be able to say, okay, I've looked at the case, I've talked to the lenders, I've gotten all the feedback. Here's what I think the solution should be. Reduce the loan by this amount, maybe repay that loan, maybe sell off this piece of land, any number of things that can happen, but they need to have that authority and then make that authority enforceable to the lenders, basically saying, okay, this is a decision. Essentially, what we're talking about is a bankruptcy process. Many countries that are, developed economies have, I think every European country has a bankruptcy process. You see it in Canada and the US and Japan. There are countries that have it. Very few developing economies actually have this because it's rarely used. It's only accessed by relatively wealthy people or corporations. But I think in Cambodia, you have so much credit that it needs this process. It's essentially an outlet that allows a system to say, okay, how do I absorb that hopefully small, but still real number of people and have them go through a process and say, okay, I've taken too much loans. Maybe it was my own fault. Maybe as a person, I made bad decisions, and trust me, a lot of borrowers do. It's not because they were rich or poor. It's people sometimes make bad decisions. So it's not all on the MFIs. The MFIs can't protect people from everything. And their incentives are not there either.
Yeah.
But a person needs to have that escape valve. Essentially, that's what we can.
And I think all the work of the sector is also to recognize that borrowing is risky in itself. And so what differentiates microfinance from maybe mainstream finance, actually how we can really implement efficient safeguard to protect the client, again, to minimize this 1% of aggressive or irresponsible lending down to 0%. I would like to turn back to you, Nitin, and ask you again shortly to make sure we have a bit of space for question. These two recommendations I take on financial literacy and also building maybe complaint mechanisms that go beyond, more elaborate into more bankruptcy process. Is that something that could be inspiring for developing maybe the next round of a customer protection principle? Is that something that you think could be addressed or improved at the level of certification of the existing framework?
I'm not so sure. I think that requires a little bit more thought, frankly. I mean, I need to still process that from a certification perspective, but I definitely think it can be part of the Safe Finance Initiative. Right? It's there. The mechanism is, it's there in the field now, right? We need to develop this mechanism, design it, right? Because even before you do all of this, the first question is people have to be comfortable in coming up and saying that, yes, I have a problem, right? And who's going to be able to do that? And that's where the CSOs, the civil society organizations actually have a very critical role because they have the depth of outreach. Right. So again, this is not just on BFIs. There are stakeholders in the entire chain, and all the stakeholders have a certain role to play. So can we then work with CSOs to actually help identify people who are at a certain level of stress with respect to debt, and inform them about the mechanism that is there, get them to use the mechanism that is there. Right. So that's the very first step that we need to figure out in all of this again, right? So I don't. We shouldn't be limited by the fact that should it be part of certification or it should be done, And the Safe Finance project is there; it's functioning. Things need to work within that mechanism. Let's not develop parallel mechanisms, right? We can do certification to see if it's working well, to some extent, Actually, an assessment. Sorry, you don't even need a certification. You need just an assessment will tell you what the gaps are. So,
I think we could take a few questions from the room, and then we'll go back to you. And I'm looking also at the time to not have issue with the organization.
Oh, cool.
Are there some mic or
questions, Gabriel and Isabel? So
maybe Isabel, if you want to speak loud.
Can we have a mic?
No, I mean, here, there's a question here also from Gabriel. So
yeah.
So thank you very much for the panel. It's really great. I was just reflecting on how in the industry level, I think Cambodia is a very interesting case because it's a country where of all countries in the world, there has been so much work done at the industry level to prevent harm from happening for clients, right? With assessment, certification, the work at CMA, the lender, so many initiatives. I think you've pointed to that in a few of the interventions that, of course, certification or assessment is not going to do everything. It's not going to prevent all harm from happening. What it does is that it minimizes the risk of it happening, and it evaluates whether the institutions are well equipped to identify it and then address it when it happens. But then I think, you know, with Cambodia, despite all of the safeguards, sure, more can be done at the institution level, but it highlights that the limitations of prevention. And I think that as a sector, we've done a lot of prevention, but maybe not enough on what happens when clients experience harm.
Yeah,
and I wonder if there's more that could be done at the industry level to share just good practices on how do you deal with cases when harm happens, even if proportionately is very small, as 1%, 0.5%. And we know that matters because one life that is affected matters. And we know that those safeguards are never going to be able to prevent every harm from happening for everyone. And so maybe it's following up a little bit on what Daniel was saying on debt counseling or bankruptcy. Like, is there something at the industry level so that it can be done there and that it can start with Cambodia and then share more things?
Maybe to try to summarize into a question for the panelists, maybe you can ask Wendy if there are any initiative that you think is really addressing that element is when the harm happen. How can we help this customer, Wendy, maybe?
Yeah. So I think there are two things. One is this initiative that we're working on around Consumer Protection Center. Those are also includes the counseling parts. And also a part of self-finance. Self-finance is more of preventing from a problem. However, when they have a problem, a module 5 around personal finance and debt management, there are also initiatives to resolve that also. But we also need to make sure that the counseling approach is professional. And I share the point that Daniel raised. Like yesterday, we also discussed that. I think we welcome the opinion to work together, but it have to go through the part of ecosystem. It have to be a part of the strategic of the sector, and we are very welcome that opinion and work together. Do more, because we currently also engage with the UN resident coordinator and also all the key stakeholders in the country to collect more feedback. How can we do more to protect clients? So we are in the process. So as a sector, we commit to this, and we welcome all the opinion, and we of course welcome all the actors in this room to join us. We need you. Yeah.
I think, Dr. Bliss, you also want to add something. You're burning.
I think we need really ombudsperson with an office for the restructuring process also of more than 1% of loans which were unethically provided. ID poor people with consumer loans not able to repay, this is unethical. And this should be treated, and there should be a solution at least to cancel the interest rates and to find out how or what happens with the remaining loan amount. And this is required, I think. And this is the only chance also to bring civil society again into the discussion.
Nitin, you disagree? You have one sentence to answer.
I disagree. I think number one, anybody who is vulnerable, not just ID poor, right? We have to be very clear about this, right? There are stigmas and cultural issues attached around labeling people, right? So anybody who is in debt stress and vulnerable has to have a mechanism. Okay, that mechanism they should be able to use that mechanism. Number one. Okay. Sorry, what was the other point on
You're talking about
The mechanism, independent
when
ombudsman.
somebody lent
Ombudsman.
inappropriately. No?
Sorry, no, not the ombudsman necessarily, but there were two, you
It
said
is.
that it should be waived off, right? The loan or the write it off of part of
Exactly.
the loan. I think microfinance is not a one-time loan thing, right? Let's please go back 10 years when the portfolios of the poor came out, right? It's very clear that from Brazil, from Mexico, Bangladesh, people who are part of the social protection mechanism, who are receiving cash transfers, that is one strategy that they adopt in all of this. Loans are another strategy also that they adopt in all of this, right? Because let's be clear that they will anyway go to a money lender, right? A cash transfer is never enough, right, for families to be able to, kind of. So there is a bit of a contradiction there, but we have to understand that there is a grant mechanism, there is a loan mechanism, and all of these have a certain place in the financial life of a household.
Yeah.
So I think we need to be a little bit more careful about it, right? I agree that unethical loans, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm talking only about this. Huh?
Unethical loans, absolutely. But I would not say that everybody who's in a social protection program,
I didn't say
don't give
Yeah,
loans.
but one thing I would say, I know we're out of time, but one thing I would say, the problem with unethical loans, I agree intuitively. But the problem is this, making that decision, arriving at what is unethical and what is ethical is so hard. How do you get a person, because we're talking about informal incomes, nothing's documented. So a person said, well, the loan officer says, hey, he told me he makes that much money. And now he says he didn't make it. It is a very difficult thing. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen. Of course it happens. I think it's much easier to say, hey, let's deal with your situation now. And hopefully the lenders that are the most aggressive are going to be the ones who actually suffer the most, because too many of the clients are actually defaulting and exiting and declaring bankruptcy, and it will be financially untenable.
But it's also a question of all the stakeholders taking their own responsibility, right? If there is too much distress on the client, the MFI needs to take the responsibility, but that will develop the governance again in the sector. Maybe I would like to take one more question.
Gabriel
there,
had a question.
if I can. Yes. Yeah.
Sorry, can we just have
It's
a
important to ask
microphone?
questions.
Can we have a microphone for the question, please?
Yeah.
So that the online audience can hear?
We agree very much and disagree that you probably taking 15,000 people. We cannot say like it.
Gabriel, hang on, we can't hear, so let the mic just come to you. Sorry.
Here's the online.
Right.
Yeah,
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
You probably sit with 10, 15,000 people currently sitting with a real problem. We can debate until we blue in the face about ethical or non-ethical, about sufficient standard or not sufficient standard. Until such time you create a mechanism for that 10,000 people, for those individuals, to get them out of the crisis that they are in. I think you're achieving nothing. Actually, you're maybe preventing a problem for the future.
Yeah.
But that's what we've done in the microfinance world now. And I mean, I've been in this world for as long as any of you, is we've done it repeatedly. We always talk about these good things. We get to the next crisis. In the next crisis, we make the rules for the next crisis. But there are individuals now that are not coming out month on month. And to flip it over, if you create a mechanism that is effective in dealing with a problem with that 1,000 or 10,000, then actually all society will back off. But the investors will have to come to a party. It's not for the government to fund this. It is the investors that invested the growth in this loan portfolio, that made the rules, that sits on the boards of directors. Now they sit back, they hold their money back, and they achieve nothing in terms of creating a solution. Because somebody will have to write off that loan that the person can't repay. Otherwise, you've achieved nothing. You've just, one more word and I'll shut up.
It's important to have a question.
A loan that is 70% of your income over 5 or 10 years. How do you restructure that? It is hell of a difficult. Enough.
Yeah, I think we touched that point about the refinancing. Indeed, that is a higher amount and a higher tenor that is also bring some risk. So we all acknowledge in this panel that there is an opportunity to improve the products according to the client's need and to better equip the client. But the importance of bringing all the stakeholder at the table and make them responsible. And you point at the investors and the shareholders, also important to discuss about what is sustainable growth and profitability of these institutions, so that at the end of the day, it's not the micro borrower that is paying the price of a unsustainable growth or profitability. One last question, Camelia, eventually, and then we can conclude with the panel. And I'm sorry for being delayed to the organizer.
Thank you. So my name is Camelia Genova from Investing Visions. I have met with some of the people in this room, and many thanks for everybody who made it all the way from Cambodia to sit here with us. Well, we have spoken a lot about the massive amount of debt in Cambodia, and I think it's really important to look at the possible solutions. And that is why I have a question to our participants in the panel as experts in the field. So in order to deleverage and to reduce the amount of debt and over indebtedness, where do you find practical solutions? For example, do you think that limiting the amount of loan that is allowed to a single person or to a single household could be a solution? Because now we know that in Cambodia, that servicing ratio can go as high as 70 or 75%. That's really outstanding. Usually we have the servicing ratio of around 50% or even less. Do you also think that a solution might be to restrict even further refinancing? We see institutions who have around 1/3 to 40% of the portfolio that are refinanced loans. We do have the red zone and the yellow zone limitations. So for everybody working on the Cambodian market, I think these are terms that we already know. But do you think that restricting them even further could be a possible solution? And then the third question.
We may have only the time for 2 questions.
Yeah, I mean,
eventually.
this is still one question, but maybe I just want to hear
We have
from...
more. I think we have less than 2 minutes and we need to conclude. So if it's okay to take just the first 2 questions.
Just a small comment. To make sure that you are really responsible and prudent in your loan approval, do you believe that controls should be better, so that controlling or auditors goes to the field and check how the loan approval was done, how the cash flow analysis was done?
So can I ask Wendy to answer in less than 1 minute? Really, I will have to cut you otherwise.
No doubt, we do everything to support client, whether through a lot of alternative solution. And what I would like to call also is the investor community, please join us in that part of the solution. As the Secretary General of the Professional Association, I can see the challenge to negotiate with investor also to have client. And also in last year we met in Paris, we talked about how we can do more for the sector. During the meeting with the SPTF, we call for investor to contribute the support to the initiative of the sector. So please join with SPTF and also with the partner that we're working on to have the client and also to strengthen the sector. So from the Professional Association, we will continue to talk with you about how we can best support the client.
So I think there are these 3 questions which are, I think, very relevant that we can continue to discuss also after together. Because I think it's a debate, it's a discussion that will go on, and we hope that during this 1 hour we have been able to unpack a little bit. Demystify, maybe?
Yes, sir.
I need really to conclude.
Yes, quick add. I think example, we have a Prime Minister and we see encourage loan restructure to support the client with the grace relief, some relief, but the covenant that we have with the investor. So that one we will talk with you, and we need your understand and be a contribute to support client. So yes,
and I think the sector will continue to work. SPTF also has been facilitating Daniel. Research from Professor Bliss has also been very helpful to better contextualize. So if I can take 30 seconds to conclude. first, thank you for your interest in the topic. I think we share one thing common. I hope in this room is that we want to continue to support Cambodia and that the sector needs more responsible microfinance and maybe not just less to leave a gap, maybe for more space for the black sheep. And so it's important to contextualize economic context, cultural context. We cannot compare to the US eventually, the Cambodian markets. And the problem is not about defining how many households, how many loans per household or per person, average loan size. I think nobody denied the over-indebtedness issue, the governance issue. What's common that the CMA, the researcher, journalists we are dealing with today, SPTF, all the sector is working to address this issue. Self-regulation has its limits, and we need to work together, build this partnership. We all have this role to play, shareholders, by fostering sustainable growth, sustainable profitability. There is more to be done, and I look at you, Nitin, and the SPTF as well, in rethinking the way we look at resolution mechanism, maybe need to be more elaborate to focus also on the vulnerable people, maybe this side of the aspect that we don't see. And indeed, let's also recognize that we have built a system that in most of the case works well. But we are all sitting in the room because we have this common intention to bring that 1% of the case that do not work well to bring to 0%. So we cannot prevent all the risk, but we can work further on also preventing what happened afterwards. And remind ourselves also that the purpose of microfinance is also to improve resilience. And so we should make sure that microfinance in Cambodia continue to build resilience and not making clients more vulnerable. If I can conclude from this 1 hour, and I can only invite you to our panelists to discuss more if you have more interest. Thank you for.
Thank you.
Thank you, Noemie.
And also tomorrow breakfast.
Another panel
Yeah.
right after us, like literally now.